This is Nightmare in Wisconsin. The trial of Taylor Schabusiness. Accusations of first-degree intentional homicide, strangulation, mutilation, dismemberment, and necrophilia. We bring you raw, unfiltered courtroom audio from the trial of Taylor Schabusiness. Nightmare in Wisconsin.
The state is indicating that for today, they've got one more witness, and it's anticipated that witness is going to wrap up around 5 o'clock, and then we'll break for the day, just to give you a sense of how long we'll go for today. With that, I'll turn to the state. Mr. Lizzie, are you calling the next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The state calls Detective Philip Scanlon.
All right, if you want to step up, and before you have a seat, turn and face her and raise your right hand. She'll put you under oath.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the court, so help you God.
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Please have a seat and then state your name for the record.
Philip Scanlon, Scanlan.
Okay, and then the witness is yours, Mr. Lizzie.
Detective Scanlon, can you tell the jury how you are employed?
As a law enforcement officer of the City of Green Bay Police Department.
What is your current role with the City of Green Bay?
I am currently assigned as a detective in the Bureau of Detectives.
How long have you been with the Green Bay Police Department?
24 years.
Do you have any law enforcement experience prior to the Green Bay Police Department?
I was a sheriff's deputy for 1 year prior to that in Outagamie County.
Could you talk a little bit about any training or educational experience that you have that led you to be a law enforcement officer?
Well, I have a high school diploma. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I was certified in the state of Wisconsin through the Law Enforcement Academy, and then got hired in Outagamie as a sheriff's deputy in Outagamie County, where I went through a field training program. Then transferred to the Green Bay Police Department in 1999, where I again went through another 14-week field training program, maybe a bit longer than that, and then your standard classes and yearly in-services. Then went into the Drug Task Force 2010, where I received more training in narcotics investigations and violations of controlled substances, and then went into the Bureau of Detectives in 2014, where I was trained in more serious crimes, investigating deaths, persons and property crimes.
So I think you indicated you went to the Drug Task Force in 2010?
I did.
Did you work there until 2014?
I did.
And then in 2014 you became a detective?
That's correct.
And as a detective, what's your typical role in handling investigations?
Assigned to the Detective Bureau, we get called in for investigations typically more serious in nature that require follow-up from a detective on a crime that occurred maybe above the scope that a normal patrol officer would investigate. We get assigned those cases with other detectives to investigate, follow up on those investigations, interview witnesses, question suspects, and then ultimately prepare facts if warranted to the District Attorney's Office of Prosecution.
As part of a detective, are you trained and experienced in processing crime scenes?
I am.
And is that on-the-job training, professional training, some combination?
Combination.
And as part of your work through the Green Bay Police Department, were you asked to assist with a crime scene on February 23rd, 2022 at 829 Stony Brook?
I was.
And describe how you initially became involved in the case.
I received a call in the early morning hours, asked to come in, take part in that investigation. I responded to the Green Bay Police Department, where I was briefed on what had been learned by patrol responding to that address earlier that night. I then responded to the address where the crime scene had already been maintained, and then went from there.
When you initially responded to this, or do you know about what time you initially responded to the scene?
About 6:30 in the morning.
And who was with you when you arrived?
I met Lieutenant Brad Strofe, who was a detective lieutenant. I met with the sergeant on the scene, patrol sergeant on the scene. It was Sergeant Brester. I believe Sergeant Tom Bain was present as well. And then forensic specialist for evidence collection, Miss Andre and Miss Cerneski arrived. And then shortly thereafter, Detective Cassie Pakla arrived to assist me as well.
When you arrived, did you immediately begin processing the scene?
No.
What did you do initially?
So we initially did a walkthrough. I met with the sergeant on scene, kind of got updated as to what happened so far. Double checked that we had a crime scene log started that we can document who's coming in and who's coming out. I had caused to have phone contact with detectives that were questioning Ms. Schabusiness, and there was some question about the location of his body. So initially I did a walkthrough of the home looking for a body. That was one of the first things I did.
You mentioned that you were talking with some other detectives. Is it common in your work that when there's multiple detectives working on the case that you're going to have ongoing phone contact at the outset of an investigation?
Yes.
Were you aware of whether or not other detectives were assigned to meet with and interview Ms. Schabusiness?
I was aware of that.
And do you know who those detectives were?
I was Detective Graff and Detective Kemp.
And do you believe they were actually speaking to Ms. Schabusiness while you were in the home at Stony Brook?
Yes.
And were they providing you information that she was giving them in the course of the interview?
They were.
And what was the purpose of them contacting you with that information?
Initially, we were aware what the patrol officers found when they arrived at the scene based on the 911 complaint. And she was providing them with information that his body was by the bed. I was in the basement by the bed. I didn't see a body. So the initial information was an attempt to find the body. Not knowing initially at first that we were looking for a whole person. They then provided information to look for a tote next to the bed that she had described, which I observed. I was told that she had made mention of a bag, and then in a short period of time it kind of came into perspective that we weren't looking for a whole body, and then we knew we were going to be doing a recovery of multiple parts.
And in terms of actually going into the tote and going into the other bags that might have been on scene, is that something that you did right away while you were having that initial contact with detectives?
No.
And what were you waiting for at that juncture?
We knew we had consent to be in the house from the homeowner, but we had chose to start writing a search warrant, which is very routine in a homicide investigation. We were also having kind of learned the scope of what we were looking for, not finding a body out in the open. We decided to wait for the forensic doctor, Dr. Tranquil, to arrive from Dane County, and the medical legal investigator, Taylor Schwab. We wanted her to arrive before we started looking through containers.
And is that how it happened, that Dr. Tranquita and Taylor Schwab arrived on scene before you began in earnest to search for the remains?
Yes.
And did you also obtain the search warrant that you mentioned?
Yes.
Prior to discussing the specifics of analyzing the scene in the basement, can you give me an overview of the home at 829 Stony Brook, the layout and what you observed upon entrance?
Sure. It's a single-family home, story and a half. It is the front of the home's a living room that opens up into 2 bedrooms on the south end of the home and a bathroom. There's a kitchen to the north end that goes down to a side door off of the driveway. And like a lot of those homes, the side door that accesses the driveway, there's a landing and you can go up into the kitchen, into the first floor of the home, or you can go down into the basement of the home. The basement was partially finished on the west side of the home, and then the east side of the home, divided by a partition wall, was an unfinished basement for storage and laundry.
In terms of areas in the home where items of evidentiary value were noted or collected, can you talk about which portions of the home were significant to the investigation?
Yeah, myself, Detective Cassandra Pacula, and the forensic specialist and the doctor and Ms. Schwab, we focused primarily on the basement. We understood this far that the basement seemed to be the most likely place we were going to recover the remains. We also had some cause to compare items that were found in the basement with the kitchen. So primary focus of this investigation was on the stairway off the side driveway going down to the basement, and there were some items found in the kitchen as well.
Do you know if there was anything else of evidentiary significance recovered in other portions of the home on the first or second floors?
There was not.
Detective, I'm going to show you a series of photographs here and ask you to review those to yourself, and then tell me once you've had a chance to review them.
Sure.
Detective, I'm showing you what have been previously marked as exhibits 16 through 21. Can you review those for me? Have you had a chance to see them?
I did.
Do they appear to be consistent with your observations in the residence on February 23rd, 2022?
They are.
Your Honor, I would ask for permission to publish one at a time, 16 through 21, using the overhead projector.
Your Honor, I'm not going to object to these exhibits and no objection to publication.
Okay.
Detective Scanlon, is Exhibit 16 now displayed on the screen?
It is.
Can we dim the lights again, Your Honor?
Pardon?
Can we dim the lights again?
Yeah. Also, Detective, there's also a video down here if that's easier for you, but you can look at either one. It's fine.
And what is depicted in Exhibit 16?
That is a front view of 829 Stony Brook from the street.
And which door did you use to stage as law enforcement?
So we made the decision to enter once we started to process the scene through the front door. When we initially arrived, we know a lot of the initial first response from officers talking to the residents was through the side door, which is the way the officers happened to approach that day. So when we decided to process the scene, we started to use the front door, and we kind of staged in the living room and then worked our way through there.
All right. And this photograph, does it depict the side door and where it's located?
That's correct. The side door is off of the driveway.
And Exhibit 17? Officer Scanlon, is Exhibit 17 now on the screen?
I see that.
And what is depicted in Exhibit 17?
That is an image of the kitchen on the first floor with the vantage going into the hallway that leads to the bedroom and the front room.
And Exhibit 18?
It is.
And what is that?
That is another picture of the kitchen, but with the vantage flipped, focusing on the landing off the side door off the garage.
And Exhibit 19, is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what is depicted in Exhibit 19?
This photograph was taken particularly of the wooden knife block that was right next to the stove.
And what was the evidentiary significance based on your understanding of the investigation?
When we started to process the basement, we had found several kitchen knives, what appeared to be kitchen.
Tell me a little bit.
That we believed, based on how they were found, would have been involved in the homicide, and the knives were consistent both in number and appearance with the knives in the kitchen block.
So it appeared that there were how many slots missing on the knife block?
There's 4 knife slots missing and a kitchen shears, scissors. We recovered 4 knives that appeared to look like the knives that would have come out of that block.
And the next exhibit, I think, is Exhibit 20. Is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what is that?
That is from the kitchen looking out the side door into the driveway.
And does that depict like an outside or screen door? So the inner door is open and there's a screen door to the outside?
That's correct.
And Exhibit 21. Is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what is contained in Exhibit 21?
This picture is from basically the position of the landing next to the side door, looking down the basement staircase.
So after you processed the scene upstairs and evaluated what was present in the kitchen area, you did make your way ultimately to the basement?
We did.
And that scene was processed by you along with the forensic team from Green Bay PD and the medical examiner's office?
Yes, it was from Taylor Schwab, who was from Brown County Medical Examiner's Office, and then Dr. Tranquil, who was the lead doctor at the time at the Dane County Medical Examiner's Office.
Okay. Once you began your inspection for human remains and collecting them, how did you and the team sort of document or parse out how you were going to locate remains?
So we started with what we knew was there with the Fleet Farm bucket right at the bottom of the stairs that we considered to be container one for the purpose of evidence collection. The doctor removed the human remains in front of us. And then we also examined what was in the bucket besides the remains.
If there were items of human remains or portions of a body, who was responsible for collecting the portions of the body?
The doctor was.
If there were other evidentiary items that were non-human remains, who was responsible for collecting those items?
So it's just as a matter of procedure in this, with the forensic doctor being there, the doctor was the one that removed the remains. We were cautious to overexpose items in these containers. So the doctor actually removed the remains and the items in there and put them on display for everyone to observe and note. Then the doctor collected the human remains, and then forensic specialist Larson and Chernesky ultimately collected the other items that were in the containers.
And who was then responsible for maintaining and processing the non-human remain portions of evidence?
Forensic specialist Larson and Chernesky.
And those were brought back to Green Bay PD then by members of your department?
They were.
And just to be clear, you use the name forensic specialist Larson. Is that her current name?
I'm sorry, that's her maiden name, Andre.
Okay. So we're talking about the same person. Larson
Yes.
and Andre are the same person.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. So you indicated the first item or the first container that you processed was the black pail. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Detective, I'm now showing you what have been marked as exhibits 22 through 25. I'm going to review those.
Thank you. Thank you.
And do those accurately depict your observations on the scene at the Stony Brook residence on February 23rd, 2022?
They do.
Your Honor, I would ask for permission to publish those as well.
No objection to exhibits 22 through 25, and no objection to publication.
You can go ahead and publish them.
What is depicted in exhibit number, is exhibit 22 now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what does that show?
That's at the landing, looking west into the finished portion of the basement. It also depicts the black Fleet Farm bucket and a multicolored towel that was next to it.
And exhibit number 23, is that now up on the screen?
It is.
And what is depicted there?
That is a picture facing north that catches back to the stairs and a small storage unit. It's basically an overview of the Fleet Farm bucket and the multicolored towel next to it.
And exhibit number 24, I believe. Is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what is exhibit 24?
It's the black Fleet Farm bucket and the multicolored towel. I see they have some placards down in this photo and are holding a sample indicator.
What are the purpose of the placards?
Forensic specialists take great care in documenting what they're capturing. So they'll take a picture of an image with a placard, and then as they itemize evidence, will refer to that placard that they collected.
And exhibit 25, is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what is shown in exhibit 25?
This is 2 knives, a Jolly Rancher, a nail, a razor head, and some flesh tissue was described. These were in the bottom in the Fleet Farm bucket underneath the remains that we recovered.
So these are items that were located in the bucket and then ultimately collected by Green Bay PD?
They were.
I'll show you what have been marked as exhibits 26 through 36. We'll take a moment to review those. Have you had a chance to review those?
Yes, sir.
Do those photographs also accurately depict what you observed and in some instances collected on the scene at Stony Brook on the
They do.
23rd of February? Thank you. I'd like to publish then, Your Honor, these as well.
Exhibits 26 through 32, no objection, and no objection to publication.
You can go ahead and publish.
It is 26 through 36, just to...
All through 36?
Is Exhibit 26 now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what is shown in that photograph?
It's a photograph of the finished basement from the staircase, from the bottom of the staircase, looking into the finished basement.
And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, but there were several different containers that were located with body parts. Is that correct?
That's correct.
One was the bucket that was container 1.
That's correct.
Container 2 was which?
Container 2 is a blue Jimmy Choo duffel bag that's not visible in this photo.
It's not visible in this photo. Where was it located? Can you see the area where it was located in this photo?
If you look at the photo, just to the right of the wood grain wall, you'll see a multicolored lamp. Next to that is a entertainment center, makeshift dresser, and there's personal items on that, and including the blue bag.
So that would be on the left-hand side of this photograph. Out of view is where that Jimmy Choo bag was located.
That'd be correct.
And is the container 3 was what item?
Container 3 is a pink and black Under Armour backpack. That is just out of view at the left side of the stack of beds.
And what was container 4?
Container 4 is a blue, I refer to it as a blue tote bag, or I guess tote, or light blue. It's in the far right side of the bed, covered by what appears from here to be a blanket and some items.
So Exhibit 4 is depicted in this photograph?
It is.
Or container 4, excuse me.
Container 4.
Correct. And is it displayed in this photograph essentially as you found it when you first went down to the basement?
Yes.
And could you describe again for the jury where they could find that blue tote?
So looking at this photograph, you'll see a couple box springs and a mattress towards the back of the room. If you look at the right end of the beds, between the wall and the bed, you'll see a light blue object. That's like a tote storage bin. That's container 4.
And does it appear to have anything on top of it?
Yeah, it's covered by personal property. There was a blanket on top of it. There was some clothing, some jackets on top of it that kind of obstructed the view of what was inside the tote.
And to your knowledge, had law enforcement or any medical examiner personnel significantly disrupted how this room looked prior to this being photographed and you collecting the remains?
No.
Exhibit number 27. Is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what is displayed in Exhibit 27?
It's basically a photo of the same room from the opposite corner, looking back towards the staircase. It depicts the entertainment center that I just described on the wall that was out of view from the previous photograph. It's from a distance, but you can see the items on top of that entertainment center, including what we call container number 2.
So that Jimmy Choo bag is now visible in this photograph toward the right-hand side, is that correct?
Yeah, it's I guess the dark blue object with the handle raised up.
And Exhibit 28, is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what is shown in that photograph?
It's the photograph that's inside the room facing south, the south half of the room, including the bed, the entertainment center on the left, including container number 2, which is the Jimmy Choo bag, container number 3, which is the bright pink Under Armour backpack, and then container number 4 is not visible anymore because the pub table and the video game block its view.
Now, I think it's been previously discussed, there's a substantial amount of human remains in each of those 4 containers. As you were going through this scene and photographing it, are you making any observations about the floor, about the bed and other items in the room as to the existence of human remains, blood, things of that nature?
I was.
And what did you observe?
So I learned from detectives talking to her that this was believed to be the location that body was cut up. I found it kind of remarkable that there's no blood on the. I didn't observe any blood on the carpeting. There is later determined to be a significant amount of blood on the top of the mattress and the comforter that's on top of it. The carpeting doesn't extend all the way to the wall. There's a portion of concrete on the other side of the bed that the bed partially covers. You'll see what appears to be dried blood and partial pieces of bodily tissue in that area around the bed on the far side out of view. There, you can't tell from this point of view, but there's also what appears to be red substance bodily tissue on the Jimmy Choo bag. The pink backpack, when looking closely at it, you can tell that there's a dark liquid seeping through the bottom, which was presumably blood based on what we found inside. And then on closer examination of the tote bag, the blue tote, you'll see what appears to be blood or dry blood around it.
Is it fair to say that aside from what's found in the containers, there's not a lot of outwardly visible blood or human tissue material that's readily visible in the remainder of the room?
Yes, I walked through this room initially when I got there, and I did a kind of a quick lap looking for a person. And some of these items didn't come into focus until taking a closer look with a decent flashlight and looking at a closer level at these items.
And is this now Exhibit 29 on the screen?
It is.
And what is shown in Exhibit 29?
This is from the north wall looking back towards the front, I guess the right side of the bed, the east side of the bed, with depicting primarily the black and pink Under Armour backpack, which we refer to as container number 3.
And Exhibit 30, is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
What is Exhibit 30?
Essentially a close-up of that backpack, container number 3.
And Detective, did you, along with the medical investigators, open that backpack?
We did.
And what was found inside there?
Inside this backpack, there is human remains, including small parts of remains and a larger part of human remains, some of which were laying loose inside the backpack, some of which were wrapped inside of like a plastic shopping bag.
And Exhibit 31, is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what is shown in Exhibit 31?
There's a lot of things on here that this photo captured. It captured container number 2, which is the blue backpack. It captured some Clorox wipes that we found pertinent to this investigation, along with a shelt bottle, which covered a chain. It captured what I recognized to be a methamphetamine pipe, a crystal meth pipe, just in front of the Clorox Peach bottle. And then to the right of that is what I would refer to as a gem baggie, that had a substance in it.
And you indicated that you spent 4 years in the Drug Task Force?
I did.
Through your training and experience both in the Drug Task Force and subsequently with the investigative division, have you had an opportunity to come into contact with methamphetamine?
I did.
And you're familiar with not only the drug itself, but also the items that are used to ingest it?
I am.
And you believed, based on that training experience, that was a pipe consistent with meth use and a gem baggie consistent with a small amount of methamphetamine?
That's correct.
Were those items collected?
They were.
Were they later field tested?
I later did, yes.
And what was the result?
So I removed the contents of the substance in the green gem baggie that's depicted here. It was approximately 0.21 grams of crystal substance that I recognized to be crystal methamphetamine. I used a Marquis reagent field test, and it indicated the presence of methamphetamine.
So you indicated we've got the drug paraphernalia, the suspected drugs, there's some cleaning products, the Jimmy Choo bag. Did you indicate that there was a chain located in this photograph as well?
It's hard to see, probably from a distance, but underneath the tipped over shell bottle on the right side of the dresser, there is like a dog's choker chain underneath it.
And Exhibit 32, is that now displayed on the screen?
It is.
And what's shown in Exhibit 32?
That is a close-up. It's a photograph of a close-up of the choker chain that was underneath that shell bottle with a placard for reference.
Yeah. Are there also, what's on the far left of that picture on the bottom?
A pair of sunglasses, or a pair of glasses.
And that chain was collected subsequently by the Green Bay Police Department?
It was.
And Exhibit 33. What is depicted in Exhibit, or is 33 now displayed on the screen?
It is.
And what's depicted in Exhibit 33?
This would be the same choker chain presented out on a clean piece of brown paper for display for photographing.
And that item was collected, you indicated, by the Green Bay Police Department?
It was.
I think that there are... All right. I'll move on with the photos, actually. Exhibit 30... Well, actually, no, I'm going to show it. Do you have an evidence handling kit with you, Detective?
The lights back on?
Detective, I'm showing you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 8. Do you know what that is?
This is an evidence bag that is marked as Exhibit 8. That is initialed, and it has a Green Bay Police evidence code sticker to reference the dog choker collar chain we've just discussed.
Okay. So the bag itself has a description. Does it also list an evidence number that was associated with it?
It does.
And what is that?
The description is a silver dog choke collar P chain located under shell bottle, Exhibit 13 on TV. That's all it displays. I know that it says on TV stand. It has a case number of this case, and then it has the exhibit number 543024.
Okay. And did you say 13 or 23?
It's referring to Exhibit 23, and then it has our category number as well.
Okay, and the Exhibit 23, does that coincide with the placard?
It does.
Okay. I would ask that you open that if you could, display it for the jury.
Have it open.
All right, and then could you take it and simply display it for the jury? Thank you. I'll give you a moment to put it back up and seal it up. And to save time, I'll not ask you about the other evidence, but or the other chain that was located. But was there, in fact, a second chain located on scene?
There was.
And did you have a chance to handle that item as well, or view it closely?
I viewed it closely, and then forensic specialist Andre and Chernesky collected it.
And did that chain appear to be substantially similar to the one that you just opened and located?
It appears to be a very similar choker collar chain. I did notice that the second chain, which was on the pub table next to the Pac-Man game, the chain was actually not loose on both ends. It was actually closed shut, looped through.
And we'll return to the photographs. If we could, Judge, with the lights again. Thank you. 34. It's Exhibit 34 now displayed on the screen.
It is.
And what is depicted in that photograph?
It's kind of a top-down view of the Jimmy Choo bag and the other items on that entertainment center.
And you indicated human remains were found in that bag?
They were.
Do you know what other items were found in that bag?
Yeah, when Dr. Tranquil arrived, he took the bag down onto the floor. He removed a bunch of plastic bags, like shopping bags, numerous plastic shopping bags. Also in that bag was human remains, small pieces of human remains, and then there was like a red stain, which appeared to be blood-stained Lysol wipes. They look just like the Lysol wipes that you saw on the container on the shelf. And then there were 3 kitchen knives that appeared to match the same block from the upstairs kitchen in that bag.
Right. Then Detective Exhibit 36, if you could pull that one out.
I have it.
Is that now depicted on the screen in short order?
It is.
And what is contained in Exhibit 36?
So that is the loose paper shopping bags that were packed inside of the Jimmy Choo bag, along with what appear to be wipes that are red stained.
So this is what was
removed from the Jimmy Choo bag.
Thank you. This was removed from the Jimmy Choo bag after the human remains were taken out by the doctor?
The human remains were commingled inside these bags, so the doctor would reach in, take out either remains or the bags, and he was collecting the bags and the wipes, and then he was also collecting the remains separately.
Okay. So he would take the remains and then leave the bag and the wipes for you to take?
That's correct.
Objection leading.
Overruled.
Detective, I'm now showing you what have been marked as exhibits 37, 38, and 39. Do those photographs appear to accurately reflect items that you collected on that date at the Stony Brook residence?
They do.
And I would ask for permission to publish those as well, Your Honor.
No objection to exhibits 37 through 39. No objection to publication.
Right, you can go ahead and publish them.
And exhibit 37, is that now on the screen?
It is.
What is depicted?
It's one of the knives in the Jimmy Choo bag. It appears to be a bread knife out of the kitchen block.
Were you able to make any specific observations about that knife?
I mean, the obvious observation was the red tissue and staining on the handle and on the blade. One thing I particularly noticed was for a serrated bread knife that the sharp pointed part of the knife were virtually ground down, dulled, if you will.
Okay. So that is a knife that was serrated, is that correct?
Yes.
And what do you mean by ground down?
Being familiar with a bread knife, you know, it's a large serrated knife to cut bread, and it's the pointy ends are shallowed, more flattened, dulled.
And exhibit 38.
I have it.
And is it now depicted on the screen?
It is.
What is shown in that photograph?
So that appears to me, these two knives were taken out of the Jimmy Choo bag. It appears to be what I would describe as a kitchen paring knife. The blade appears bent. And then there is what appears to be like a kitchen steak knife out of the block with the tip busted off. The handles are stained red, and there's some dried red material on the blade as well.
I'm going to very briefly jump ahead, but as part of your work on this case, did you attend the autopsy in this case?
I did.
And do you know if any evidentiary items were collected from the autopsy that you observed that were consistent with these knives?
Yes.
And what is that?
One specific thing that was collected by the doctor was a metal tip taken out.
That
remains.
And based on, did you get a chance to observe that?
I don't recall specifically observing it, but he described it as consistent with this.
Okay. Dr. Tranquil was present on the scene when you collected these knives as well, is that right?
He was.
And then exhibit 39. Is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what is shown in that photograph?
That's showing the three knives set down for display for a photo after they're taken out of the Jimmy Choo bag. It actually appears to be the opposite sides of them, of the knives.
also accurately depict the scene as you observed it on February 23rd?
They do.
I'd like permission to publish, Your Honor.
I've seen exhibits 40 through 42, showed those to my client. I've showed all these pictures to my client. We're not going to object to those exhibits and no objection to publication.
Right, you can go ahead and publish them.
And Detective, what is Exhibit 40 now on the screen?
Yes.
And what does 40 depict?
40 is a photo of the north end of the finished basement. If you're standing with your back to where the bed was in the room, it depicts what I would describe as like a pub table with the arcade game. There is a choker chain on top of the pub table.
Then Detective, Exhibit 42, is that now on the screen?
It is.
And what is depicted in Exhibit 42?
This is that pub chain placed on a paper bag and measured for display for the photograph.
And is that was that item also collected by Green Bay Police Department?
It was.
That's the chain that you described earlier as being consistent with the chain that was shown to the jury?
Yes.
I'm now showing you Exhibits 43 through 47. Those also accurately depict the scene as you observed it on February 23rd, 2022?
They do.
And permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may.
Is Exhibit 43 now on the screen, Detective?
It is.
And what is depicted in that exhibit?
This would be the west end of the bed that's closer to the wall. On the bed you can see the pillow, and there's a multicolored comforter. It's red, white, and tan. There is what we referred to as container 4. It's the kind of a top-down look at the light blue tote with items on top of it that conceal what's underneath it.
And is there any potential or suspected blood staining depicted in this photograph?
Yes, you can see what appears to be red staining, which appears to be blood. On the left side of the red, white, and I believe that's blue comforter. There's some red staining that appears in front of the pillow, and then some down lower. There's what appear to be blood drops.
And Exhibit 44, is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
What is shown in Exhibit 44?
That is essentially a top-down view of what we refer to as container 4. It's the light blue tote. I had added that there, if you look to the left of it, there's a brown paper laid on the ground. And the purpose of that was to start to remove the items on top and then place them on the brown piece of paper to later examine, so that we weren't moving them to the floor.
Okay, so the items that are on top of the tote, does this photo depict them as they were when you arrived on scene?
Yes.
And then the item to the left, the brown paper that's placed on the floor, that that's something you added?
Yeah, I placed that for the purpose of removing those items to the paper covering the floor so we could look at them later.
Okay. Exhibit 45, is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what is shown in Exhibit 45?
That is showing the blue tote that we've been discussing, some red material on the front, and then that is, I guess, a very limited view of the remains that are inside the container.
Is it fair to say that a substantial amount of human remains were recovered from the inside of the tote?
Yes.
Exhibit 46, is that now displayed on the screen?
It is.
And what is depicted in Exhibit 46?
We moved the multicolored comforter and observed a cellular phone, and then some larger areas of what appeared to be blood staining.
In Exhibit 47, is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what is shown in that photograph?
It is showing the items that were on the bed moved to the left and exposing what appeared to be a larger area of red staining that appears to be blood. The cell phone is still there, but we placed a placard to memorialize that exhibit number for later collection.
Detective Scanlon, were efforts made to try to determine whether or not any of the suspected blood material seeped through that mattress?
Yes.
And what was done?
I later took a box cutter and I cut a portion of the top of the mattress to see how far the blood stepped into the mattress.
Do you know about how far it did?
When I cut it open, under the top mattress, there's like a foam underlayment. The blood seeped where I cut a little over maybe an inch or so into the mattress.
Where the mattress, was that top mattress, if I recall correctly, it looks like there's one mattress and two box springs, is that right?
That's correct.
And did you lift up the first mattress to see whether blood had soaked through the bottom of that mattress?
We did.
And did you observe any blood having soaked through that top mattress?
I didn't observe any blood in the box spring below it, no. Below that stain, no.
Your Honor, I've shown my client exhibits 48 through 54, no objection. Also exhibit 63, no objection. I know they're already offered, but no objection to publication.
Detective Scanlon, I'm showing you exhibits 48 through 54 and exhibit 63. If you could review those.
Thank you.
And detective, do those likewise accurately depict what you observed at the Stony Brook residence on February 23rd of 2022?
They do.
And permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may publish.
Exhibit 48. Is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
What is shown in that photograph?
There is a upright cabinet, the wood grain cabinet, against the west wall. That's covered initially by, I think that's a bed frame. It also shows the blue tote and then one of the knives. Actually, the knife that was, I believe that's the knife that was pulled out of the blue tote.
Was there anything, I apologize, was there anything subsequently located in that cabinet?
Yes.
And what was that?
We received information from Detective Graff and Detective Kemp to look in the cabinet specifically for a wood box. Once this cabinet door was opened, there was a wood box on the bottom level of the cabinet door inside that. And then we found a flesh-colored dildo inside that box.
Exhibit 49. Is that now depicted on the screen?
It is.
And what's shown in that photograph?
That is the photograph that's depicting primarily that wood box that had been opened and then the flesh-colored dildo.
Exhibit 50. And what is shown in photograph 50?
Exhibit 50 is it's taking a picture from the bottom of the stairs into the unfinished portion of the basement on the east side of the home.
And does that depict a stand-up shower?
It does.
And exhibit 51, is that now on the screen?
It is.
What is shown in exhibit 51?
It's an overview of the floor drain and lower portion of the stand-up shower.
And what was of evidentiary significance to you in this particular area?
When we looked at the shower, we observed red substance on the shower walls, the shower seat, the shower floor. There was some red substance and some flesh material on the shower drain and then also on the floor drain. Slightly behind that curtain, there's a blue squeegee that had red substance that we'd been able to determine was involved.
And were you able to observe where the shower drained into?
Yeah, at first it's not readily observable, but when we remove the top of the cover and examine the drain actually, there's a pipe that runs straight out from underneath the tub and stops shallow to have the water go right into the floor drain.
And exhibit 52, is that now on the screen?
It is.
And what is shown in exhibit 52?
It's a close-up of that floor drain that's right in front of the shower. There's some red staining, and there's some hair, and then there is what appears to be flesh or biological material, I guess.
And exhibit 53. Is that now on the screen?
It is.
And what does it depict?
That depicts the stand-up shower with the curtain pushed aside. There's some what appears to be blood staining, some red drying on the bottom right, and then the squeegee, and your standard shower stuff.
And exhibit 54. Is that now on the screen?
It is.
And what does it depict?
It's a photograph of the shower drain with some flesh or biological material caught on the drain.
And you have exhibit 64 in front of you?
54 is.
Okay. That's 54. Do you have exhibit 64 as well?
Oh, I'm sorry. 64? Did I hear you right?
Is it 63?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's 63.
I have 63.
I apologize.
Yeah.
Thank you. While we pull that up, what is depicted in Exhibit 63?
It's a photograph of the concrete floor at the end of the carpeting. The bed had been previously moved. You can see it standing up off the side. And what is visible in this photo is that there is red substance. There's also what I've recognized as like swipe marks, almost cleaning marks, swipes in the red material, loops. In the bottom right, there's a measurement. It appears to be a portion of a shoe print that was previously under the bed, and it was exposed by moving the bed.
Okay. And who moved the bed?
I did.
Okay. You know why you made the decision to look under the bed?
I was just surprised by the lack of blood on the carpeting, and so having the bed covering part of the concrete floor, I wanted to move it to see what was underneath it. And then it appeared to me to be wiped up red substance underneath the bed.
Exhibits 55 and 56, I'd ask you to review those. Before I ask you about them specifically, I have to lay a little foundation. In addition to collecting evidence on the scene that day at the Stony Brook residence, did it become apparent that you maybe did not have all of the body parts that you needed to complete human remains?
It did.
And at some point, did you leave the Stony Brook residence and go to another location to look for more remains?
We did.
And where did you go?
We went to our Green Bay Police evidence storage garage, where we had a Chrysler minivan transported for processing subsequent to a search warrant.
Had you been made aware that other detectives developed information that would suggest there may be human remains in that vehicle?
I was.
Do you know if that came from the interview?
I'm not sure. I knew that we had caused to obtain a search warrant to search that vehicle for remains. So being at the scene and knowing what we were still looking for, myself, Detective Pacula, Dr. Tranquita, and medical investigator Petra Schwab left to go there and look.
And did you then conduct or assist in the conducting of the search of the vehicle at the Green Bay storage?
I was present when the vehicle was opened and searched, and I made observations to confirm that we had recovered all the remains, but I didn't personally search that vehicle, but I observed these exhibits.
Okay. Is it fair to say the search was done by the medical examiner's office and the forensics team from Green Bay PD?
The recovery of the remains was from the forensic doctor and the other members of the Green Bay Police Department and their forensic specialists searched the vehicle.
Your Honor, I would then ask for permission to publish exhibits. I think these are 55 and 56.
You may.
I just got to look at my notes, Your Honor. The court already ruled that those exhibits are into evidence, correct?
Yes.
As to publication, I'm going to object to the one involving the tote.
Are these different than the ones that were just ruled on when the jury was excused?
No, they're the same.
Right. Your objection is noted. You can go ahead and publish.
Detective Scanlon, is Exhibit 55 now shown on the screen?
It is.
And what is that photo display?
That photo is a photograph into the driver's side sliding back door of the minivan, particularly the crock pot box, which we shortly thereafter found remains in.
And Exhibit 56, is that now up on the screen?
It is.
And what is depicted in Exhibit 56?
The crock pot box was turned upright. The opening, there's a flesh-colored material that's a thigh, and then there's I believe it's a pair of shorts over the top of it, and then there's additional remains underneath that thigh.
Okay. And did the material? Did you make any specific observations about what the human remains looked like when they were removed from that crock pot box?
Yes, Dr. Tranquita emptied the remains out of that crock pot box, and he itemized them to confirm that we had then what he believed as the doctor was the entirety of the remains.
Then Detective Scanlon, I asked this earlier, but did you subsequently attend the autopsy of Shad Thyrion?
I did.
And where was that?
At the Dane County Medical Examiner's office down by Madison.
And when did that take place?
On the 25th, I believe.
And who was present for the autopsy?
Myself and Detective Graff attended the autopsy from an observation room. Dr. Tranquita and I believe medical technician Vickerman attended the autopsy.
What is the purpose of a law enforcement officer attending an autopsy?
It's not uncommon at an autopsy for a forensic pathologist or the attending doctor to have questions about the scene. They can also relate to us through speakerphone, things that they're observing, and answer any questions that we might have if we have questions for them in regards to our investigation. It's also an opportunity for, once the autopsy is completed, with the medical examiner's office then collects what they and we believe to be items of evidentiary value. They had, up until that point, had custody of the remains. They take those items and they seal them in bags, and then they turn them over us to collect for continued investigation in the law enforcement. Things like swabs of the body or items that they found to be evidentiary value, they'll turn over to us, and we bring it back and enter it in evidence.
Based on your observation of the autopsy, did it appear that Dr. Tranquita was regularly collecting swabs for evidentiary purposes?
He was.
And did you observe him seal those items and provide them to you?
He did. As he was doing the autopsy, he was swabbing parts of the remains. He would then put them in a cardboard box. I'm up in an observation room, so I don't see every movement he does. But he then collects them, he itemizes them, he puts them into a sealed bag that is documented with a receipt, an invoice, if you will, to show what he turned over to me. And then I took those bags with Detective Graff, transported them back to the Green Bay Police Department, and then started to secure them in evidence.
So just to clarify specifically with respect to the swabs, you observed him take swabs of Shad Thyrion's body, he packaged them for you and sealed them, and then provided them to you to take back to the Green Bay Police Department?
Yes, during the autopsy I observed him take all parts of the remains out of the containers. He would examine them as part of the autopsy. He would take swabs as part of the autopsy. He would then collect them in swab containers, and then turn over to me all the swabs which were then labeled and then secured in an evidence bag that he had signed and sealed. So then after I collected that back, then I opened that bag, and there was over 40 swabs I don't remember the exact number, but they're all itemized as what particularly was swabbed, and then I entered them into evidence specifically for the purpose of future need to send to a crime lab.
And then when you entered them into evidence, you entered them specifically based on what that swab was or how it was labeled on the outside.
Correct. The doctor takes so many swabs. If we would practically if we would just send the bag to the crime lab with 40-some swabs in it, that would not meet their submission guidelines. So we have to itemize those swabs. So if he takes a swab of a particular part of the body, puts it in a box, labels what that was swabbed, collects those collectively, bags them, turns them over to us. We then open that bag, and then we itemize and enter into evidence each individual swab.
And that's the process that you followed in this case?
Yes.
I have no further questions of the witness at this time, Your Honor. I apologize. This went longer than I had anticipated.
Well, counsel, the direct examination of this witness went on a little bit longer than I anticipated, and given the time of day, my suggestion is that we break now and assume with cross-examination tomorrow. Any objection to that, Mr. Freilich?
I'm fine with that, Your Honor.
Any objection to that, Mr. Lezay?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Detective, you can step down. Okay.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I indicated to you we'd stop around 5 o'clock. It's a little after 5 now, and this testimony was a little bit longer than I expected, but we're going to break now. I'm going to give you an instruction that I gave you earlier in this case, but it's important. It's important for every case, so I'm going to recite it to you again. And that is, do not communicate with anyone about this trial or your experience as jurors while you are serving on this jury. Do not use a computer, cell phone, or other electronic device with communication capabilities to share any information about this case. For example, do not communicate by blog, email, text message, Twitter, or in any other way on or off the computer. Do not permit anyone to communicate with you about this case, and if anyone does so, despite your telling them not to, you should report that to me. I appreciate that it is tempting when you go home in the evening to discuss this case with another member of your household, but you may not do so. This case must be decided by you, the jurors, based upon the evidence presented in the courtroom. People not serving on this jury have not heard the evidence, and it is improper for them to influence your deliberations and decision in this case. After this trial is completed, you are free to communicate with anyone in any manner. These rules are intended to assure that jurors remain impartial throughout the trial. If any juror has reason to believe that another juror has violated these rules, you should report that to me. If jurors do not comply with these rules, it could result in a new trial involving additional time and significant expense to the parties and the taxpayers. Having given you that instruction, have a good evening. I'd like you to report tomorrow morning by 8:30 into the jury room in this courtroom. Right? All rise for the jury. As I indicated earlier, I'd like counsel to report tomorrow morning at 8:15. We will take up that issue briefly regarding Mr. Freilich's read the submittal that he made, and then I'll determine whether further hearing is needed on that issue. The other issue I wanted to talk about, however, is I know there's going to be videos coming. I don't know if that's tomorrow or a different day, but I think the attorneys were going to talk about redactions to that. It's a 7-hour video, only 5 hours, give or take, actually has dialogue on it. Have the attorneys discussed that issue? I'll start with you, Mr. Saunders.
Yes, on Saturday, I think there's largely an agreement. It ended up being a little bit more than an hour, maybe 70 minutes. But I think we agree on portions that'll be played in the first phase.
You agree with that, Mr. Freilich?
Yes, I do. I did meet with both prosecutors, Your Honor, and we talked about this at length, and I asked for additional video footage, and we reached an agreement.
Okay, great. I'm going to take you at your word. If there's things I need to decide, the sooner you bring that to me, the easier it is for me to address these issues, so we don't have the jury sitting back there waiting for us to make decisions. But it sounds like we've got an agreement on that. So, is there anything else before we break, Mr. Saunders?
No, I don't think so.
Mr. Freilich?
Your Honor, I did receive from Dr. O'Donnell, the defense toxicology expert, an email on Friday and then yesterday. I think it helps to summarize because it's real short. I'd like to give it to the court and give the state a copy of it. Could the clerk make a copy of it for you? Okay. Thank you.
Oh, just make copies, yeah.
All right. Well, while we're making copies, if there's nothing else, then we're in recess till tomorrow morning at 8:15.
You're listening to True Crime Today in the Hidden Killers podcast continuous coverage of the trial of Taylor Schabusiness, Nightmare in Wisconsin. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage. More raw trial audio next.